In most of my painting videos, I show the beginnings of a painting, that is, the way I get things started. But in this case, I thought it might be interesting to show a painting that was near completion, but which I decided to rework for other reasons. In this case, I wanted to make the paint thicker, and I wanted to make the paint strokes look more deliberate and confident. And as I go, I'm going to be referring back to my reference photograph to see if I've been entirely honest about my color choices. Often in this case, the easiest point for me to begin is simply the brightest spot in the picture, which in this case is the nearly pure white of the clouds in the sky. And I'm making those placements of paint and then working out from there. I'm seeing some variations in the sky and cloud colors that involve some cobalt blues, some ultramarines, and also some grays and touches of alizarin. I'm not afraid to let this sky color extend over some of the other areas I'm going to be repainting because it's always nicer to work wet into wet anyway. And it also makes sense that those distant mountains are going to have some blue in them anyway. I'm realizing that I artificially lightened the near mountain plateau, probably because I was extrapolating from my own experience in Southern California, where things get bluish much more quickly than they do here in the desert. Making that near mountain darker is probably going to be one of the more drastic changes I'm going to be making in this repainting. These eroded rocky hills in the near background are some odd colors that I might not expect, so I'm doing my best to turn off my brain and just put down the colors and tones that I see. Then I'm working forward in space through the distant pasture and the shapes that define the barn, always comparing the last color decisions I made to the new ones. In the process, I'm experimenting with removing some of the detail of the fence and gates in the background, which I also had an inkling were not really contributing to the picture either. When it comes to repainting the masonry, I'm coming to the realization that I had exaggerated the redness of that shadow and that it really needed to be bluer. I need to keep reminding myself that neutrals are valuable in a painting and that I don't have to keep pushing saturation as I might have done during my advertising career. I'm also looking for opportunities to create lost edges, such as the shadow side of the foreground tree merging into the shadow near the front door. There's often a bias to put defining edges around known objects, but I know from experience that realism depends in some part on losing those distinctions. I've got this large ground area. I want to have some color variations in it, and I can see those in the scrap. There's some yellow greens, there's some blue greens, and there's also some reds in there, and that color variety will make it interesting, but I don't want to make it so complex that it distracts from the main interest up there on the porch. My reference photo is telling me that some of the most intense color in the scene is actually the green grass between the house and the outbuilding, so I'm going to put that in and see how it works. And then once it's on my brush, I'll see if I can find places to share it in other parts of the picture. I can also see some intense color in the orange of the mullions of the window frame. So I put those in and then see if I can find similar colors radiating out from that. I've made a decision that the boards of the deck are not quite as bright or as warm as I had them in the first iteration, so I'm putting down more of a gray color there. I'm going to go around the painting and see if I can merge up some areas that are really very simple and don't really require the detail and edges that I had in before. It's always fun to come in and put in little bright spots in the painting, in this case along the edges of the front posts and the edge of the house and things like that, because it makes things pop. But I want to be careful not to get too carried away with that, or I'll start creating distractions from the main center of interest. My ambition with the tree is to record some of the colors that I'm actually seeing there without getting caught up in too much of the chaos of detail that is in the reference photo. I don't really want to attract too much attention there. I decided to pick up a big brush and boldly put some wet color over the foreground grass in an effort to keep myself from picking at it. I may be cheating it a little darker than it is in reality, but that's partially to keep the viewer's eye from falling out the front of the picture. And I'm hoping to come back to this grass with just a few marks that suggest the grass without getting into any detail. Once I get a little brush in my hand, it's real easy to overdo little marks, so I'm going to try very hard not to get carried away and to pause between each stroke to make sure I'm not putting in distracting details. Once I put in those orange details into the window, I want to make sure I don't put too many other marks too far away from that would compete. It would be really easy to put a lot of little marks in the foreground grass, but I really don't want to do that because I don't want to attract much attention down there. I feel like I have some responsibility to indicate the kind of scratchy brushiness of this tree. I think it's a cottonwood. It's pretty typical all over the desert Southwest. If someone can correct me on that, please do. But I'm just going to try to create a general sense of depth within the bush, but without too much value change, because I don't want to create too much interest there. I just want to give the impression of it. Here I make another assault on the foreground grass, but I'm keeping things soft. I just think I had gone a little too dark there. A few little marks here and there to suggest detail without actually putting it in. And also I'm trying to merge color that's on the wall behind the tree and on the roof behind the tree. They're all kind of subtle changes, but I want to make those suggestions. As the sun is low in the sky at this time of day, I think it was about 4 or 5 in the afternoon, I've got these two light sources, and one is a warm light that's raking across the face of the building and catching the edges of uprights and trees. And the other more general source is a blue light that is reflected light from the sky above. And that's the light that's hitting surfaces like the roof. And so all the colors created up there are going to be quite gray. Here I can't resist putting in a few shadows of boards, but I'm trying very hard not to get carried away. I've come to the realization over time that there really is no one single best stopping point for a painting effort. It's always a trade-off and dependent on what sort of mood you want to create. My bias is probably at this point towards putting in too much detail or more detail than I really intended, so I'm kind of on guard for that. I'm presenting this video to you sped up 10 times. The actual elapsed time for this repainting will turn out to have been about an hour and a half, and that's fairly fast, but that comes from the concept that my original color choices were pretty close to what they should be, and that I really just needed to mostly match them and look for opportunities to refine them. This shot is from a little while later after the paint had dry, and I decided to glaze some gold ochre over some of the brickwork. So here's where I finished up. I think it turned out pretty well. I'm happy that the paint strokes look more confident and that my color choices seem more deliberate. In the earlier version, contrasts were more subtle, and I think the saturation toned down a bit, but I think that may have been my bias towards Southern California atmosphere, and I think I've now successfully readjusted it so it looks more like the clear air in Utah. But let me know what you think in the comments. I hope this was helpful in some way. Take care.